Welcome to the Football Autobiography Show. I am your host, Josh Schneider-Weiler, and it is such a pleasure to be with you all today. In our show, people in the football industry like players, coaches, technical directors, executives, and more reflect on their careers and reveal things they've learned along the way. This week's guest is Gary Curneen. Curneen is the head coach of women's soccer at the University of California State Bakersfield, and prior to Cal State, Curneen was the assistant women's soccer coach at the University of Cincinnati and head women's soccer coach at Wingate University. Gary holds a UEFA A license from the Irish FA and a Premier Diploma from the NSCAA. However, Curneen is probably more well-known as the author of the Modern Soccer Coach series, which aims to educate coaches. His books touch on a wide variety of subjects, from pressing to preseason training. In all, he's written 6 books, and 2 of those are actually kids' books. You can learn more about him by going on his website, www.garycurneen.com, or his Twitter handle, @GaryCurneen, where he posts a lot of his work and his beliefs. I really recommend it. He has a lot of useful information on there on football in general, not just on coaching. He's an expert on coaches using social media and coaching coaches, which is why I was really excited to have him on the show. In this episode, we discuss building culture in a team, how coaches should use social media, coaching coaches, youth player psychology, and his advice for Paul Scholes. Without further ado, please enjoy my chat with Gary Curneen. So I'm so thrilled to be here with Gary Curneen, head coach at Cal State Bakersfield. Gary, how are you doing today?
Doing great, Josh. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on the show. Before we jump into your coaching and some important topics, I'd love if you could just give the audience a little bit background on yourself and your childhood growing up in Northern Ireland and how you ended up coaching in the United States.
Yeah, sure thing. I was born and raised in County Tyrone, which is in Omagh, Northern Ireland. Was obviously an avid soccer player growing up, and dreams of playing in the Premier League and scoring goals at Old Trafford every other weekend. But unfortunately, had 1 or 2 problems with the ability end of things. So I had from probably around 15, 16, I was kind of coming to reality that I wasn't going to go over to England and make a living in the game. So I was decent at football and the playing side of things, and I was good in school. So the opportunity arose to come to the US. The idea was planted probably around 15, 16, and then came to the US on a scholarship to Wingate University in college, and played there in 4 years. Had a great experience there, and had the opportunity then after graduating to move on to the coaching side. Coached there for a year and a half with Gary Hamill on the men's side as an assistant coach, and I did my master's and then really embraced that side of the game. And then the women's position opened at the same school, and I moved on to that side, was the head coach there for 8 years, and then moved to University of Cincinnati with Neil Stafford for a year in 2013, and then as an assistant, and then the opportunity then at Cal State Bakersfield came up in 2014, and here I am. I'm just in the middle of my 4th season here, so enjoying it, and hopefully some more good times to come.
Now, you said that you weren't good enough to play in Europe and get the contract, but you were good enough to come to the United States and play some college soccer here. Who kind of gave you the idea to come play college ball in the United States? Had there been other people in your town before that had done something similar, or where was the seed planted?
Yeah, my dad. No one's ever asked me this question, so I don't go back to it very often. But I remember clear as day, my dad had a newspaper article from the Belfast newspaper called the Belfast Telegraph, and it was about this guy, and I think it was in the back page. It was colour. He was coming back to Ireland, and he was, I think he was going to play for an Irish team, but he was coming back after 4 years in America, and it was talking about his experience, his degrees, and he was quoted as saying, you're basically a full-time soccer player and you're getting an education, and and the two of them combine. And my dad, I remember clear as day, my dad saying, like, you should do this here. And then my dad then, he looked into it. It was just before that online stuff were coming into play. So, like, you couldn't just Google stuff. So you're talking 95, 96. And then he bought a book, this big, massive book that had every school address, Division 1, Division 2, Division 3, NAIA. And we just went through that book. I was just letters and knowing stuff about school, and it had, how many international players, how many scholarships, etc. And that book was a Bible for me for like 2 years, just giving me an insight and putting me in touch with people. And then as soon as the internet kicked in, that was the opportunity that I needed, because that got me connected with a lot of people, and I took it from there. And I just basically embraced it was a full-time job for me. I'd go to school 9 to 5, 9 to 3, I'd train for a couple hours, and then I'd spend 3 or 4 hours doing emails and doing letters, and I worked at it. So I wasn't like a highly recruited blue chip athlete to the US college system. I had to work at it, so it paid off.
Yeah, unlike most athletes, you had to sell them, not the other way around.
Yeah, and it was during the time as well that you had, international players were kind of a novelty in the US college system. So, there was, you would get almost a response from people to come. Coaches wanted international players because they brought something different to the table. And maybe, if you were short of it in terms of ability to go to England, you should have been good enough to play in America.
Yeah, exactly. You got the benefit of the doubt. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've read that you're a fan of habits. How do you go about building habits for your team as a coach at Cal State?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of ingraining behaviors every day is more. I believe that's more powerful than coaching points. I believe correcting someone's one mistake will not necessarily change their behavior, but you can change behavior if you're getting someone to do something every single day. And I believe like we're all creatures of habit, coaches and players. So first of all, I think the habits of players in the US, and obviously it's a hot topic at the minute with the World Cup qualification and all that there. And I think the habits of players over here is so poor, boys and girls side of the game. I don't think people maximize their training. I think we've got a massive problem in terms of maximizing. Like we are athletic over here. We have all the capabilities, all the facilities, all the resources, but we are nowhere close to maximizing any part of that. And a lot of that is because people aren't working at their maximum. People aren't thinking at their maximum. So in order for you to make an impact there, you've got to impact the environment, which means you've got to, put processes in place to where like people are hard work, and you're developing hard working players, and you're developing players who, if you watch the US, I'll go back to the game, the US performance against Trinidad and Tobago, like it wasn't that they weren't physically prepared, it was that they weren't mentally prepared. And I feel that that you can do that in a structured environment, but it's a lot of work. Like it's kind of one step back, two forward every week, because you're having to. It's a lot of correction because people don't want to be changed. People don't want to go outside their comfort zone, but that's what developing habits is. But once you develop habits, you get teams training right, you get the right behaviors in their attitude, and you get the right behaviors and body language, and you start. It's a long process, but once you turn the corner of that. Every successful team that I've worked with or that I've observed behind the scenes, that's what it's about. It's about just managing that there and staying on top of it.
Can you give me an example to kind of illustrate what you're talking about with maybe experience from one of your previous teams or even obviously your current team?
Yeah, the warm-up. I mean, any bad team or a team that's not performing well, go and watch them practice. And any team that's ingrained that has bad habits, usually we'll start a session in a in a pretty low tempo way, in a pretty lackadaisical way, whether it's they're stretching, whether it's jogging around the pitch, any team, because there's no trigger to switch on. So that's a habit as well. So it's not just good habits, it's bad habits. It's reducing the bad and increasing the good. So it's, if I would always recommend to coaches, is what I've kind of done in my books, is like, stretching and giving players their, jogging around the pitch. You're giving them a license to basically dictate how they want to train. You shouldn't do that there, because players are naturally going to, without leadership or guidance, they're going to probably go the wrong way. So you should start a session at 100 miles an hour in terms of your intensity, in terms of your energy, because that's what the game demands. So if the game was played with, if it was played in a different manner, then you could work in a different manner. But the game's played. There's one thing about the game today: it's only going to get quicker, it's only going to get faster, it's only going to get more intense. So we've got to prepare players to deal with that there. So yeah, I'd say the first 10 minutes of a training session, you've got to get players locked in physically, mentally, and it usually goes from there.
Yeah, I mean, you said before in a previous interview that I read, that you said building habits is a way of building a culture in a team, and culture is a big buzzword in sports now. And I'm curious, how successful have you been at changing the culture in the 4 years you've been at Cal State? And then kind of a piggyback on that is, who have you looked towards for inspiration in terms of how to build culture?
Yeah, I mean, two great questions. In terms of how successful we've been, it depends how you look at it. I mean, we've changed results. Like we're actually struggling in recent weeks. We're struggling at the minute. We're probably, in our first time here, we're actually underperforming in games where we should have enough. I hate using the word, we should have enough talent and enough ability to get us over the line in games, and that's not coming through. But in terms of our, if you went and watched us train, whether we're winning or losing, I like to think that you wouldn't notice the difference. I like to think that the culture's that strong that our behaviours every day aren't affected by a result. So, our players have ingrained habits of hard work, focus, energy, positive body language, things that are, some of the intangible things that kind of go with it. So whereas when we walked in the door, there was none of that there. And leadership as well, people talking, people being confident in their voice and having opinions and being able to give people feedback, take feedback, etc., etc. So I think for me, the inspiration, obviously I have a really good assistant coach, Clifton Bush, who he's been with us here since the start. It was the first time I've worked with Clifton. So Clifton's a culture guy. So what I probably thought was a culture 2-3 years ago has probably changed in the past 18 to 24 months. We brought in Donna Fichter, Donna's a team builder and a team culture architect. Which again, 3 to 4 years ago, I would have thought those people were, you didn't require those people, but now I would bring in something. If I took a big job tomorrow, it would be one of the first phone calls I would make would be to a figure like Donna, to be like, you need a coach, you need to possibly outsource your culture, because that there is going to get more people who are comfortable in talking. It's going to give you that outside opinion, and it's going to give you that little buffer zone with the players. And sometimes as coaches, we can be a little bit too close to the fire almost. And what you think is culture can maybe just people agreeing with you. But I think the stronger your culture is, and the stronger that you want to drive it as a coach, I think that you're going to have to deal with. You need people who are going to tell you the truth. And it might be different from what you think it is. So that's been, Clifton disagrees with me about 10 times a day, and Donna disagrees with me about other things as well, and what I see, and it's trusting people and building that relationship, and that's what culture is. I think culture is it is a buzzword, but the biggest. I suppose the biggest bugbear I have with the word culture is that people just think it's like people agreeing with each other and good behavior, and culture is like it's a slog. It's hard work. It's because it changes every day. Because people's the lower levels, people's motivation can change from week to week. So you have to stay on top of it every day. So you just mentioned habits and culture go hand in hand. If your culture is not great, then you don't have a lot of opportunity to put good habits in place. And if you do put them in place, by the time the players walk off the field, their minds are elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting point that I haven't really heard phrased like that, of outsourcing your culture from not the head coach, but have someone else that's really responsible for that job. I want to transition to your book series. So you wrote your first book in 2013, and you've had 5 come out since then, including 2 of those being kids' books. So what made you start writing your first book, and why do you keep writing them?
Yeah, the books were, I saw the game changing, when I started coaching. Well, first of all, I saw the game change whenever I became a coach of what I thought it was. I thought the game was X's and O's, and I didn't really have a lot of interest in moving on to the coaching side, to be honest. I had a love of the game. I was a student of the game, but I wasn't really into going out and systems and formations and all that there. But when I started getting into coach education, I saw the impact of, the business side of things, strategy, culture, et cetera, et cetera. I saw the impact of communication, different ways of doing things, analysis, feedback, sports science, sports psychology, all these different things. And I thought, and it really engaged me to where like you can set a team up one way or another on the field, but you can do it off the field and do some powerful things. And so once I started really getting into coaching, when I was 23, 24, I went in with 2 feet. Like I studied the game. I studied coaching not only on a soccer side. I studied it from a sports side as well. Who were doing what? What could you get from other sports? What are other sports doing? And then I saw coaching kind of change. I saw the game change when I was that close to it. I saw that coaching is moving in a different direction. So that's what the inspiration for the book was modern soccer coach. Whereas the coaching was, I think when I was young, you would do a technical session, and then you would do, a technical session didn't have a high physical demand. Your physical work was done separately. It was running, or it was up hills or road running. Your tactical session was, a standstill or a chalk talk or a someone putting cones out and you looking at them, or walkthroughs. And then the mental session, well, it was just non-existent. It was just, when I was young, there was zero regard given towards the mental side of the game. So I thought these 4 things, and the 4 things aren't like the work of the first book isn't like, yeah, everyone can tell you these 4 things are very, very important. So it wasn't, it wasn't necessarily screaming that from the rooftops. What was screaming from the rooftops was that you've got to incorporate these every day to your work and align them within each other. Because if a player is physically, can't get from A to B quick enough and can't get themselves a yard of space, then their technique is going to suffer. If they can't read the game, then they're not going to be able to be in the right position at the right time. So their technique will suffer. So all the same with focus and mental energy, all these here things are not only aligned with each other, they all interact and intersect each other. So that's what I wanted to, that was the meaning behind the first book. Second one was position specific work, which, I feel, and I still feel, 2 years later, that we're still moving in a direction that we're producing just general players, general possession players, and we're not creating difference makers in positions. And then the last one, the other 2 were preseason books. So how to build systems of play within your team, not just collecting training sessions, but building an identity. More tactical work, and then the pressing is obviously more tactical work as well. And then the two kids' books were after our little boy who passed away. So my wife and I both did those. So that was just a different project.
How have the books influenced your career? Have they opened any doors? How have they impacted you?
Yeah, like they've impacted me in different ways. Like they've, it's you're putting you're vulnerable. You're putting work out there, and you're now in a society as a coach where it's your criticism. I think coaches were always criticized for results. I think that's scrutinized today because more people have access to your results. Like I look back at my college and nobody knew whether we won, lost or draw. So I didn't know, like, how did my coach not, like, nobody cared nobody knew, nobody cared. Now you can check out any result in the world. So coaches are getting a certain amount of pressure from them. But, I felt that when I was writing the book, I was, it going on, you're opening yourself up to getting smashed on Amazon, or you're opening yourself up to getting smashed on people sending you an email and telling you it's rubbish. So that was, I didn't get a lot of that, but I got there's reviews on Amazon that aren't favorable. But the good stuff that I got was like the energy that I get from people saying that, I read this and it, I use this and I get something from it, or I use this and can I talk to you about this? Or, that's the person that I want to be online. Like there's so much negativity going on in the game today. I think people are, the money in the game has obviously, it's brought a lot of good, but it's brought a lot of bad. So there's a lot of pressure and people are, it's a little bit of a dog eat dog world. So what I want to be is like, I want to move the game forward. Like, and I want to move the thought process forward in coaches and in players. And I want to do that in a positive way. So I feel the books do that. Like the books are designed to do that. And the books, I feel that the coaches who connect with the books are coaches that are making a positive difference in the game today. So that's what inspires me to do, to put content out. That's what I want to be online as well. And I'll always say, like, I give 90% back to the game for for whatever I charge for a book. I'll give so much free content out, and that's what I want to be about. And
when you were starting to make these books, were you cognizant of there being a void? How there's really no. When I was researching this, I couldn't find really any examples of a series of books written by a coach for coaches, one-off books, but not really a series. Did you like actively seek out that void?
No, I was a business major, but I didn't do a lot of market research for that, and it wasn't designed to make. The books haven't been designed to make money. The books has been designed to almost create a platform for a message that I want to get through. So after I wrote the second one, I said that was me finished. And then a year and a half later, I write the third one. Then a year and a half later, I write the fourth one. And then I just put out the fifth one. And then I put out the fifth one. I'm writing the sixth one, and it's kind of that. It's just that, I love writing and I love documenting things and I love testing theories. So, yeah, when I'm a reader. I like sitting in front of a book and having things tested, and I like putting things together. So there was no long-term vision, I suppose, either from a business point of view or from a soccer point of view, that it was going to be a series. And I remember talking to my publisher when I first kind of put the idea of what I wanted to go in, and he was kind of like, "Here, listen, there's hundreds of soccer books out, so you won't, you sure you want to do this?" So, but it challenges every day, so it's just the game will continue to move forward, and I suppose then, as coaches, we have to do the same.
Yeah, well, it's just interesting because it seems that you've kind of maybe unintentionally at first, but intentionally now kind of built your own, to use a business term, brand. And so I was curious how in this ever growing online nature and this world that we live in, this global world, that brand is and marketability is so important. And so increasingly so for coaches as well. So how cognizant are you of your quote unquote brand, or how other people see you, and how do you view that in the generation of coaches?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think everyone, I agree with you, Josh, like everyone has a brand, whether it's intentional or not. I think every coach has a platform, and I think the majority of them actually think that the platform is dangerous. In fact, that social media is dangerous because, you can send the wrong message, or, you might write something emotionally by mistake, or someone might jump on you, and by increasing a platform, as in you're increasing your accessibility. So another way that people, should Jose Mourinho be on Twitter? Like, absolutely not. Like, there's no point in Jose Mourinho. His platform's big enough. But should Coach Joe with, such and such a club be on Twitter and be on Facebook? And absolutely he should be. He should be accessible to his players. If he wants to make a difference in his players' lives today, then he's only making a difference on a Tuesday night from 6:30 to 7:30. Like, you can't convince me that that's a positive difference you're making. So Coach Joe's hiding, and when his kids are on their phones all day, and he's not contributing to any of that there. So I think everyone has a brand, and everyone has a responsibility to try and get their brand out. I think from mine has probably been then from the evolution of my brand has been more from what I try to want. I started Modern Soccer Coach. I moved it into a business 11 months ago, the new year, and moved more into, like, instead of Modern Soccer Coach associated with Gary Curneen, Modern Soccer Coach now is associated with, like, I want to do conferences. I want to do webinars. I want to do workbooks for coaches. I want to I want to associate with coaches and help the top coaches get a platform. And then I want to, like, my dream of Modern Soccer Coach is to actually help develop, like, people talk about player development and developing a player that can go and play in Champions League and a World Cup. But I think I want to be involved in coach education that can develop a coach that will develop a coach into, like, what if a US coach could coach in the Champions League or coach in the World Cup? Because there's not a lot of them around at the minute. So, that's what I'm not looking at having 5,000 coaches on board, but I want to help coaches in different ways get better, and that's what my passion is.
Oh, I'm so happy you said that. You led into my next topic, and there's a couple different questions I want to go down in this road. But before we just get away from the brand just for a second, I was curious, what if you mentioned Joe, Joe coach, or if there's another university coach out there, or high school coach, or even at a USL team or whatnot. If they wanted to build a brand, a coaching brand like you, that is clearly yours is clearly done well, how would you recommend they go about doing that?
Yeah, the first thing I would say is that you've got to be prepared to be vulnerable. You've got to be authentic, and you've got to add something to the conversation, and that's where. There are a lot of coaches on social media, and there's a lot of coaches that are putting stuff out there. They're all, like, there's so many of them putting out the same thing, where it's like, you win a game and, we give a great effort today. I love my team. You lose a game and it's worked hard today. Maybe not there. I love this team. And I think, like, there's more to it than that. Like, can you not... does your player need you right after a match to say whether it was good or bad based on a result? They probably don't. Like, they probably don't care. So I think coaches are looking in the wrong places. There's, like, everyone wants process, like, players to engage in the process. But as coaches, 95% plus of coach communication online is actually about the result. It's not about the process. It's about, like, not enough coaches give share sessions. Not enough coaches put content out about their culture. Not enough coaches put content, and whether they don't want to be vulnerable, or whether they don't want to expose it, or whether they don't want to give away secrets. I don't agree with any of those. Like, none of us are working in Champions League here. Like, nobody's going to get your set piece list and take advantage of it in the next game. So, like, the coaches that are doing really well online are putting stuff out there, they're being vulnerable. People can come back and criticize it, but they're also having, there's no secrets in it. Like, every coach has a different brand. So you can read Modern Soccer Coach, you can read all the books, and you can work in an entire different way than someone else who reads Modern Soccer Coach and reads all and does it. You know, there's so many different ways to doing it, and that's where, you know, that, like, Raymond Verheyen, for example, like, whose stuff is, I've heard nothing about good things about people that have been to his event, but his brand is based on negativity. It's based on hammering other coaches, and I just think there's a different way of doing it that can bring more to the game than that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's be honest. Everyone stole ideas from someone else from the beginning. It's not like, you know, these aren't revolutionary ideas. You know, 99% of them. I mean, it's all stolen from, you know, whoever they started learning from, and that person's, you know, for the most part, obviously not every single one. But yeah, I'm curious. You on Twitter, you know, every day will tweet out these incredibly enlightening, like, coaching maxims and enlightening quotes. And I'm curious, you know, they get hundreds of retweets and likes, and I'll just read one or two of them right now, just for the audience who hasn't heard any of them. So, like, one is misery loves company. Successful people refuse to let negative people take any of their positive energy. Don't water the weeds. You know, how is culture changed? How are teams developed? One player at a time, one session at a time, one conversation at a time. So I'm just curious. I was curious when I was reading all these. You know, how do you think of them? Do you just have, like, a running book, like, somewhere, or, like, you know, you know, where do you come up with them?
Yeah, I'd love to. I sit under a tree every day and I put my tweet list out, and yeah, some of my players would probably tell you that's what he spends too much time. He spends too much time doing that. Or no, I mean, yeah, some of it is, you know, I have a book that I work through, but I pick a topic every day that just kind of resonates with me personally. I promise my kids, my players at the start of the year that nothing I tweet is directed towards them, and I ask the same in return. So, like, subtweeting, this generation calls it, where you're kind of writing something and someone thinks it's about them and they're up in the air. Like, nothing I tweet is about my team unless it's directed towards my team, and I promised them that at the start of the year. So, and I asked them for that in return. I'm like, if I follow them, I shouldn't be going, is she talking about me right now? So it's what I'm thinking about the game, or it's what I'm thinking about in terms of culture. And there's different parts of inspiration that can come from. Some come from, some come from online. There's so much information now coaches have access to. So it kind of depends. I don't have an encyclopedia of them go through. Some days I'll just sit and write one. Some days I might be in one of the moods and I'll just go off and write a couple of things. And then some days it's just something that, I've tweeted before and I'll go after again.
I want to jump back into what you kind of alluded to before, which is you wanted to get into webinars and teaching coaches, which is something I actually found fascinating because I don't think it's really been talked about. This coach, Ocean Roberts in Wales, who's known for having an incredible UEFA Pro license course. But I was curious, when you when you have the desire to do that, where does that come from, and how do other coaches, when they contact you, what sort of things are they asking for?
Yeah, I mean, it comes from a passion of the game, like to develop the game, and from like, I probably have moved to more about coach development and player development in recent years. I would say, in terms of like looking at different systems and different ways of working, and how one style of coaching might work with one team, and how it might feel with another team, and how you can't really just say it's bad coaching or good coaching. So it's like I'm fascinated by, I suppose, the business and the nature of coaching, and then I want to try and progress it. Like I do think soccer is miles away from basketball coaching in terms of like what we're given to each other. Like basketball doesn't have coaching qualifications. They have clinics where coaches go and present, and it's like you can call it networking, but they're challenging and they're giving each other and they're feeding off each other. And even here, like our basketball coaches, their level of communication to their players is insanely good. And Division One college basketball coaches are terrific at what they do. Soccer, I don't see it being the same. Like, so I want to improve that side of the game, but I see a lot of coaches that are moving and improving at it. So I want to try and draw from their success and what they're doing, and try to give that back to other coaches. But it's in terms of your second question, it's different to what people are. If people are looking for different things, a lot of people are looking for sessions, and that's something that I don't have. If a coach asks me about a session, I'll give them a session. I don't have a problem with giving any sessions out. But I think, whereas I think we're moving and evolving online to where 10 years ago, on Twitter, it was about, could you, this is Arsene Wenger's training sessions, don't share them. And there was 10 sessions, and they were you couldn't even post them. And now, you just said it, everyone, there's no secrets. Everyone has, there's some Twitter accounts now that are posting video sessions every day, and they're absolutely brilliant. They're amazing. But if you, without putting them in a system of your tactical, how you're going to organize this and where does it lie in that there, and that's something that I've kind of moved on the past 2 years, is the organization and aligning your culture and aligning your training with a certain tactical identity, because that's where the game, that's where the top teams are. That's where Guardiola has moved. He's moved the needle significantly higher in recent years. It's just been, and I think that's where, again, I think, the other night I watched the first half of Chile against Brazil, and then I watched the second half of USA against Trinidad and Tobago, and it was like watching a World Cup game in the first half to watching a high school or middle school game in the second half. And it was completely down to not just the intensity of the game, the intensity of the tactical actions, like organization, transitions. What are they trying to do? What are they trying to work? Where are they trying to get key players in? And there was so much focus and so much objective in one game, and it was just void in the other game. And that's all down to structure, organization, and environment, rather than it is the player's ability.
And you just to kind of rewind a little bit, you mentioned a couple Twitter accounts that post some great sessions. Just for people that don't know those Twitter accounts, can you just mention them if you can think of any off the top of your head?
Yeah, there's a young guy. I think it's Player HQ. It's the one thing I would actually recommend that he do. He's putting out so good. He contacted me directly, so I know how old he is, because he told me he's only 18 or 19. His work is so good that he needs to put his name to it. But I think it's Player HQ, and David Baird, who's doing the webinar, the Modern Soccer Coach webinar with me at the end of the month. David puts stuff out every single day, which is animations. And who else does it? There's a Herdman, and I try to retweet. I put a lot of it on Modern Soccer Coach MSc Education, my Twitter handle for Modern Soccer Coach. I put a lot of the stuff on of like sharing other people's stuff that I think is good. So, I think those people, like, and I commend those people, but again, we've kind of moved on now to where, like, if a coach is getting, constant information, the coach needs to be educated in how to put that towards a system of play that their players are going to understand and be able to implement and be able to see whether it's successful or not.
Do you think that, I mean, you mentioned before how you think coaches need to be coached more. Do you think that there needs to be almost more time off in the international, I mean, because there's so many games and the season is so long. I mean, maybe not quite for university soccer in the States, but for most other leagues and teams in the world, it's so long. I mean, do you think there needs to be like because there's just not enough time for coaches to really come together and have these like summits and events where they can really have some shared learning. Or at least it doesn't seem like it to me.
Yeah, no, I think as soccer coaches, like, again, what's the culture? Like, what's our culture of education as a coach? Our culture of education as a coach is that you are getting a diploma or a qualification, a coaching qualification or certification in order to get you. I have to do my A license because I need it to coach at an academy, or I have to do my USSF or my NSCAA or whatever it is. I need it because I need it to do X, Y, or Z. And then once you get it, then you're good. Like, it's viewed as a driver's license over here, to where, like, people and yeah, how do you change that? How do you get it to where, like, people have, well, I've got an A license, but I'm willing to go out and go to this event, or I'm willing to go and watch them train, or I'm going to watch these people train. Like, we had the United Soccer coaches did a open training for colleges. Like, I think it was last week, or was it the week before? Where it was a great initiative. You could sign up to go and watch a college coach train in your area, which you should be able to do anyway pretty easily, but it just gives it more exposure and a little bit more of attention. We had 6 people sign up for our school, which, we're located in a kind of challenging area. So I thought 6 is great. Wow, this is great. We adjusted the training time, went a little bit later in the morning, gave them all time to come, and 1 showed up. And that's I think a representation of where coaching education is at the minute. Like, I just think coaches, but you talk to any coach, high school, club, we'll all complain about the commitment to the players. Like, we'll all complain about players aren't committed enough to getting better. Or, are they doing this? Are they doing that? And the reality is that coaches aren't getting after it enough. Like, there's so much good stuff out now, right now, that, are we aggressively searching, or are we trying to get better? We're not. Like, the reality is we're not. So how do we change that? We need to change it. Yeah, we need to change the culture of it. And I think people, we talk about the lid in our culture. If you're a leader, you need to be the one driving it. So I think we need more leaders in that there.
You mentioned, you mentioned in a previous podcast that I listened to that you're really into sports psychology. So what fascinates you about the subject, and kind of a follow-up to that is, what questions do you still not have answers for that you're striving to get?
That's the thing that every day I'm fascinated by it. What fascinates me is that the power of mindset and the power of attitude is probably the defining factor of success or failure. It's whether you get your focus right, or whether you're motivated enough to work through adversity, or motivated enough to work through success, and can you keep your discipline, that you come in every day and do the right behaviors. Like, all that there is a decision. That's a mindset. That's people having their attitude right, and that's the power of what it can do. It can also then how you view, do you accept certain roles? Are we an underdog? Are we losers? Are we successful? Do we have a chance? These are all very, very important things that shape whether teams or players find success or not. What I can't get over, like where I'm struggling at the minute, is that there's more access to all this to players. People know that, like coaches know it, players know it, and we're still struggling with why do players, if you know the value of, especially in soccer, we know the value of extra practice. Like we know that if a basketball player shoots 0 for 25 from the 3-point line in a game, then the next morning that basketball player, you'll probably find them in the gym shooting threes, trying to get back at it. If a soccer player misses X amount of chances in front of goal, you won't find them on the pitch the next morning unless a coach is with them. So, we're getting more exposure to it, we're getting more access to better, but we're not moving it far enough forward to be like, there's not enough, environments aren't strong enough at the minute to where players are taking initiative and taking ownership. Because if the players take ownership, it's half the battle. If they get more awareness, if they see themselves improving and they see what the connection is between training and performance, or between attitude and performance, then you've got a chance. But that's the next frontier, is to moving it from the top players in your team get it, but the majority of them don't. So how can you do more of that? How can you make a bigger impact?
And what motivational tactic or technique have you found most useful to get players to kind of take more ownership and be a little bit more driven?
Well, I mean, I've used everything. I can't say everything. I've used all the resources that I feel that I can come up with, and I've tried a lot of things. What I'm basically saying is I've tried leading that player. I've tried basically sitting that player down, advising that player, listen, here's what you need to do. This is how you would get it to be a habit. You go every day and do this here. That doesn't work for certain players. You've tried fear. You've tried to be like, all right, you don't do that, you're not going to do this, or it doesn't particularly work. Try going out with that player, doing it yourself with them. Well, eventually that doesn't work either, because 2 schedules and you have 20-something other players to look after. And then you try and build a relationship. But I think the relationship it almost creates a comfort zone to where you're like, or if it's a player that isn't really committed, the coach isn't really in at my game, or I'm fine, coach likes me and I'm good. So those are the different tools I've tried. Success in different ways, I think, I would, as a motorbike flies back, I think to do it again with this group here, I would probably facilitate more of it with the coaching staff than trying. I think if you leave players to it themselves, and those players aren't at the level that they need to be, it's not going to happen. And that's the disappointing thing with players today, or that's the challenging thing, is you've got to overcome that. It's not easy.
Yeah, I imagine it's not, especially with the age range you're working at, with young adults, 18 to 22. And I'm curious, since you've been working with young adults for such a long period of time, almost around 15 years now, how have you seen the change in youth psychology?
Massive, yeah, massive. I don't know if it's a change. I've seen it move is like, it's good. Like it's in a better. There's improvements. I'm not just going to focus on the negatives. There's a lot of positives that are coming out of this generation. This generation are probably have more access to a higher level of work, better work, higher volume of work. When 10, 15 years ago, it would have been rare for even a Division 2 player to have access to gym work 2-3 times a week at 16, 17, and more than 1 or 2 nights a week training. Now they're training 3-4 nights a week. And the structures are better, the coaching's better, the curriculums are better, etc., etc. Where I think then the change has come that it's tough, that we still are up against, is probably the social structures have actually got stronger. So whereas a player, why is that player, that player is getting more access to things, but the player is not doing it. Rarely does the player do it by themselves. And when they get to college, then you have more access, but college is not a handheld, or sorry, a hold. You don't hold the player's hand to go through it. You try and give them the freedom, and they have more time in their hands, so they should be able to accept that there. But a lot of them don't. Why do they not do it? Well, probably because it's not within their social structure, outside their social structure, because they don't want to be the person that's different, that's out training on their own, that's maybe obsessed by soccer. The social structure they have at the minute is so strong that nobody wants to be outside that. Like what phones have done to us is they've almost, like, I don't mind a kid that's on their phone all the time, but I would take that off a kid that's on their phone all the time and put it down and work for 2 hours on their own. I would take that over a kid that isn't on their phone all the time, but doesn't want to be made fun of, or doesn't want to be different. And I think now we've got a lot of, like, our generation is that we can get to good. Like, we've got them to good and we can't get them to great. And that's the obstacle that, that we're all trying to get to. And then that involves more work, and that involves more dedication and more commitment and more discipline. And I think we've probably moved it from asking our players. I think we've got an extra 20% out of our players, and we've just got to get to 30%. And this thing will move, but it's getting that 10% is going to be really difficult.
Yeah. Once again, kind of referring back to culture a little bit, or that buzzword we threw about a little bit earlier. Earlier in the interview, you mentioned when you entered coaching, you thought it was going to be a lot more X's and O's. And right now, Paul Scholes in England is being rumored for the job at Oldham, despite not having really any managerial experience to speak of. And you were a former player, albeit not a famous one, or nearly as well accomplished as,
or a good one.
Your words, not mine. But I'm curious, if you were speaking to Paul Scholes or a number of ex-players who are thinking about joining the coaching ranks, what would you tell them that maybe you weren't told?
I mean, are you telling me to advise Paul Scholes, or are you telling me to advise someone whether to hire Paul Scholes?
Both. Let's go with both.
Yeah, both. I mean, yeah, like, hire Paul Scholes, absolutely, but don't hire Paul Scholes to be like, Paul Scholes has got a respect level in the game that I could never get. Like, I could take every diploma in the world. I could win for the next 5 years at every level that I coach at. I'd walk into the Oldham training room and they would just, like, what their response would be. So, the result side of the game, the professional side of the game, is about results, but it's about impact for a manager or a coach. So Paul Scholes is going to impact the locker room short term, regardless of what his, coaching level is. But, like, what I would say then is, like, who's with Paul Scholes? What's Paul Scholes' plan? So how are you going to overcome the fact that you don't have X license or Z license? Like, is someone else going to take the training? Are you going to manage it? If you're going to structure it this way, what are you looking for? And I definitely think there's a way through that there. So I don't get the whole, again, Facebook, Twitter, there's always an argument, that former players get far too much, so they have access to skip courses or licenses, and, like, maybe short term, but, like, if they don't do Paul Scholes will take the Oldham job, or maybe he doesn't, but if he takes the Oldham job, he's under 5 million times more scrutiny than I'm under. So he's under way more pressure. So if he doesn't get success, then Paul Scholes will be out of a job. So I don't think it's unfair. Like, I think that's just part of life. But what I would say then, how I would advise Paul Scholes, and what advice I would have for him is to look at a staff and not just, like, I think, again, as in the game, the soccer game, like, we've been we've been led to believe that it's your right hand man or your first assistant. It's the Brian Clough and Peter Taylor, it's Alex Ferguson, Brian Kidd, or whoever it is. It's one assistant manager who's kind of whispering in your ear, "Hey, do this," or "Hey, make the change." And those are how great assistant coaches work. But I think it's environments. I think you need 5 or 10 coaches. And if Paul Scholes went in with, that's where I'd say, I'd be like, all right, so if you want to take a manager's job, you're going to need, who's your trainer? And that's where the Italians, all right, they all take their coaching licenses and they all do their education, the Contes of the world and the Ranieris of the world, but they come in with 5, 6 staff, and 3 of those staff are physical preparation coaches. And I feel that, in Europe, or not Europe, in the UK, it's these people that come in don't come with a staff. We don't know who Paul Scholes would bring in, who's Paul Scholes' guy, and would he bring in 5 people? So I would say, if there's so many components to management and so many components to coaching. The most important component is having an impact. So if you can tick that box, then the rest of it is just associating yourself with people who are going to get the job done. And like I say, that's way more valuable than what I could bring. I could maybe tick one of the other boxes, but I couldn't tick the impact box in a environment like Oldham or a professional environment in England. So, it's and he has that for a reason. He's one of the greatest midfielders that's ever played. So, it's never going to be an ideal or an uncomplex situation.
Yeah, no, it's so interesting, and I'm curious though, just because you kind of it seemed like you were in favor of kind of the Italian approach of bringing 5 or 6 staff along with you when you take a job. But can you just clarify if it seemed that was your position? But
yeah, absolutely, yeah. If you again, a part of coaching is awareness. What are you good at? What are you not good at? Well, if you're a man manager or if you're a Paul Scholes, well, Paul Scholes may not be a traditional or maybe even a modern coach. He may not be like Brendan Rodgers out in the training field every day, just taking training, doing that. That may not be Paul Scholes. But is that Paul Scholes figure? Are they aware enough to take other people with them that the Italians seem to be able to do, and that and they've obviously got to be good, and they've got to be have the trust, etc., etc. But I think staffs, that's the one thing I learned that about 4 years ago at Cincinnati was I worked with that was the first time I worked within a staff of everyone had roles, and they were I worked with Neil Stafford, Nate Lee, and they were good at what they did, but and Nate wasn't good at what some of the things Neil did, and Neil wasn't good at some of the things Nate did, and I did certain different things. And once I worked in that environment, and you're kind of there's different sides to coaching, and I think there's got to be more specialists today. So if there are more, like I said, that culture, that outsourcing the culture, she can make a connection with a player that I can't make, either because of my position or because of my personality, or because of my communication. That player will not connect with me. So, and that's it's a good book is Clive Woodward, Winning, when he took the England rugby team, and his mindset was just it's just environments. How can you bring so many different things that say, how can you improve every player, and there's no one button that's going to improve every player, because that's just a component of the game. That's you're going to have your jokers, you're going to have your serious players, you're going to have your lazy players. Every locker room has them. So you're going to need a staff that can draw from different types of people. And I think that's where I think the Italians haven't got it made. It's not, nobody's mastered it yet. But my friend in Houston went to watch Man City and Man United in the preseason game a couple of months ago, and he was Man City had a staff of, I forget, he said it was either 18 or 19 staff out on the field warming up. Now you can have too many, of course, but that's the kind of mindset of everyone needs different things, and I think that's what we go back to environments and you only have one staff, then if you're only one person, those players, like, it's hard to hold people accountable or create a culture where you're giving players what they need. So I think if I was to take if someone was to walk into me tomorrow and take a big job, like I would just be on the phone with staff left, right, and center.
Yeah, no, it's something that doesn't get talked about all too much is how many people and the role of specialized assistants these days. But I want to switch kind of to my final topic, which is something I found interesting when I was and not really all that surprising actually when I was doing some research for this, which was I found that only 2 of the top 20 winningest coaches in women's college soccer are in fact women. And I wasn't really surprised to see that. It's been the case in many women's sports, not just women's soccer. And I was thinking, not why do you think that is, but at what point do you see women's coaches really taking over in women's soccer? And I have a follow-up question, but let's just have that as kind of the base question or the precursor.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really, I'm not trying to talk the question, but I don't look at, people ask me all the time, like, oh, here, what would you recommend? Would you think coaching females or coaching males? And like, it's that's why I try to get my books. Like, it is what it is. Like, people are people. There's physiological differences, but in a large part, there's not. They're people. Like, they need quality work. They will respond to negativity. They will respond to positivity different ways. And any locker room no locker room is going to be the same. But there's many more similarities. And I view the same with. I don't view female coaches different from male coaches. There's, like I've some of the best learning experiences I've had within the game has been with female coaches, and we've got 2 on our staff right now who are at different levels of it. We've got one who was a head coach for 10 years and has now moved, has had a family in the local area, and she has vast amounts of experience. And she's a volunteer coach, which means she's not with us, full time. She's with us in training and occasionally with games. And then I have a young coach who's 23 years of age who has just been introduced, and she's coming off a playing career. And both of them are absolutely brilliant. Like, their awareness of what's going on but I don't see them as being any different to where, like, well, they don't see that, or, well, they see something that I don't see. Like, it's people are people,
Yeah, no, I mean, I obviously agree, and that's why I'm so curious. That was kind of just a precursor to, at what point do you think men's teams will start taking on women's coaches and giving them real shots?
Yeah, no, there's a question. Yeah, I mean, I obviously haven't got a clue because I'm not in the men's game, but I was reading the articles that the Spurs, the female coach of the San Antonio Spurs, took
Becky
the preseason
Hammond
game during the week.
Becky Hammond,
yeah, I thought that's. I mean, like, Popovich is again. It's gonna. I tell you, here's my answer. It'll happen in another sport before it happens in soccer, and not because of ability, because of that's the way everything. That's the way. Like, my criticism of the game worldwide is that we don't take initiative in our changes. We're not risk takers in terms of. There's not enough of us are risk takers in environments. We all, ask any coach what they're reading at the minute, and the majority of them will probably say legacy. They're reading something on another sport, but why does that have to be done with another sport first? So, similar to that theme, a female coach would I think it's happened, right? It's happened in France with a French team, but not at probably a high media level. But I definitely think it could happen because there's a lot of quality female coaches out there. So whoever it does, good for them.
Yeah, no, I was just curious. I mean, it's obviously football isn't the most progressive sport, and that's, I think, also down to money as well. There's just so much money tied up into it that people don't want to take those risks that could be worth it.
But nobody wants to take, like in certain ways as well. Like nobody wants the bad press in terms of like talk about the kids and talk about our players today, that you don't want to be the one who's different. But that's like all these things I'm saying about players and how we can improve the game. Like the majority of that applies to coaches as well and people in leadership positions. Are we thinking outside the box? Are we just being reactive? And I think like in too many ways we're just being reactive. Like I think there's better practices, there's different ways of doing things, and that should obsess us more than a result, or more than doing the same thing over and over and over again. And that's something where as a coach that's why I moved on from Wingate when I was there 8 years. Probably 2 of those last years I felt as if I was just getting the same experience as a coach. I was getting success, but it was the same picture. It wasn't necessarily experience, it was just the same experience. So like I think we should be open to these things, but not only should we be open to them, like we should be looking for them, we should be driving them, we should be encouraging them. But we're all creatures of habit, as we said, so we're all to blame for that, myself included.
We're all creatures of habit. What can you just? I want to ask just some general questions before I get you out of here, because you've been so kind with your time already. Can you discuss an important moment or conversation you've had in your career and how it impacted it?
From a coaching point of view or from a personal point of view?
Either.
Either. Yeah. Coaching point of view, I mean, there's people that I'm pretty open-minded, so where like I feel everyone has something to offer in the game. So like, I've been fortunate enough to sit with some people. I sat with Kieran McKenna he's the U18 coach at Manchester, maybe U21 coach at Manchester United, and I was fortunate that he was at Tottenham Hotspur, young coach, and I spoke to him. He spent an hour with me at the Spurs training facility, about 3 or 4 years ago, and I just came away from it so inspired. He just talked about a different component of the game that was like, wow, like it was just on a different level. And he sat with a pen and a pad and he just scratched out stuff on training and I just went away thinking, I've got to get better here. Like I've got to get better in these areas and I've got to do more here. And so that would be on a soccer side. And then probably as a person side, it's just those it's truth tellers, I suppose. It's like, Donna Fister has probably been a big impact on our program here, and our coaching here has been like, things that you think the messages that you're sending to the players, she's going like, but are they not seeing this instead? And you're like, oh wow, yeah, they are seeing that instead, and it just gets you reevaluating, and both of those are the similar themes, and both is awareness, and both is an extra level of knowledge that you've got to get to, and be open as well.
Is there you spoke about that session where he I'm sorry, I forget the name of the Manchester United academy manager that you just referenced.
Kieran McKenna. Yeah,
Kieran McKinnon. Where kind of open your eyes, and I remember listening to you on a different podcast, and you had a similar moment when you watched Jose Mourinho play, and you mentioned earlier about watching Jose Mourinho coach, a training session, and you mentioned your your admiration for Pep Guardiola. Is there anyone that you would love to observe a training session of now who you haven't? Or, I mean, who, rather?
I've never seen Guardiola work. So I would, Guardiola or Brendan Rodgers. You can get a fair bit on Guardiola online. But I'd love to see what he does. I'd love to spend a couple of days with him. I think he's obviously top class. Brendan Rodgers is someone that I really admire as well. From a personal point of view, I'm a Northern Ireland guy, so our national team is on the verge of doing something pretty special and qualifying for another World Cup. So I would love to see. I'm obsessed by people who do more with less, because I think there's and structure. I'm obsessed by structure. So people like Guardiola's structure in possession is just as big as it is out of possession. But you've also got Mourinho's a structure guy, Simeone's a structure guy, Michael O'Neill in Northern Ireland's a structure guy. And that's the conversation I have with our men's coach here, who's from Ireland. He's a Dublin guy. He loves the freedom. He loves the little bit of players having a license to play. And we talk about that all the time. And I'm like, no, I'd rather see a tight, close game where the defensive shape is just first class. So I like seeing how those people do it. And Mourinho gets a bad rep, but I think a lot of his bad rep just comes down to his portrayal in the media. I think his way of working is he's one of the best of all time. So, he would any of those coaches, I've just named you the 5 best coaches in the world, basically. So any of those.
I'm curious though, since you did mention Brendan Rodgers, what is it that you admire about him so much?
Communication, I've tried to I went to Scotland last year and tried to get in to watch a little bit of his work or try to sit down with his staff or someone who's worked with him. Everything I've heard about him has been his level of communication is phenomenal, and also then the way Rodgers played has been and from a Northern Ireland guy myself, is it's changed, right? Because he implements a dynamic possession-based system into not only not into a league, a Scottish league, lower level leagues in England, Premier League in England, but also himself. He's not playing off his background or working off his background. He's working off his work and how he's worked with the Mourinho's, or he's gone to do he's done his intelligence work basically in Portugal, Spain, wherever, and I think that's inspiring for me, because how much of us coach off the same canvas than when we've been exposed to as a player, the majority of us. So when I'm talking about my inspiration as a coach has been I'd like to work a different. That was one of the reasons that we've done here in the program is I was never a possession guy before I came to California, and then all of a sudden the game out here is a possession game. So my first year here, I went with what I knew how to coach, with a group of players that weren't really shaped to play that way, and it went as bad as you would think it went, So when we tried to build a system of a culture, I then took it to be all right, I'm going to build something that I've never done before on the field. And then I'm obsessed by people who do that. I just think it's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it must be incredibly difficult. What do you want your legacy to be?
Oh, I've never been asked that before. I might say legacy is a strong word. I mean, reputation. I mean, I want to be someone who, obviously, if you're a player, I want to be someone who it used to be enjoyment, Josh. I used to be my initial first stage as a coach was I want players to play for me and be you know what, I enjoyed that experience. I enjoyed my soccer. It was coming in every day. It was different. It was high energy, and I loved it. I've probably moved from that. I don't know. I've changed. Obviously, I've changed as a person, and I've changed with a bit more experience, and you move on to different things. And I think my like right now, I'm like, it's growth. Like I'm just again, I use the word obsessed. I'm like, I have a thing where I want people to achieve their potential. Like, and I want people to come in every day with a purpose. I want people to be aggressive about what they're pursuing. And if they don't, like, if it's fine, like if you're not into that, like, that's fine. But you and I cannot coexist when I'm coaching you. Like, it's just not going to work. That if you come in every day and this is something like, you want to be successful on the soccer field, or you want to be a good student, or you want to be like a person who can bring energy to something, like, then I get along with those players all day, and we've got a good group here that are all about that. But the players that just kind of meander, and the lazy river takes them wherever they want to go, and I struggle with that. So those are that's something that I want. Like, I want to teach aggression. I want a playing style that's based on aggression. I want people to see something and go after it. But for a legacy, in terms of like, in terms of how other coaches would view me, there's so much negativity going around in the game, in the world, online especially. Like, I just want to do it in a positive way and with a positive tone.
What would you name your autobiography? If obviously the books you've written are not autobiographies, although they include your life. But if you had an autobiography, what would you name it? I'm not sure. It's probably like something towards like again, all the positive things, like I say about like what I want to be or who I want to be perceived as. Like the reality of also the game, the game is a struggle. Like, the game is like, we're coming off a losing streak at the minute, and that's not like something that I haven't experienced in my life. Like, it's something that I view the game. I love the game. I love working in the game. But like, the game is what it is. Like, it's like life. It's the reality of it is just, it's get kicked, get up, get kicked, get up. So it's something along those lines, to be like, one of these. My wife says that he uses the phrase "the Titanic" all the time. So I don't know why she's saying that, because she thinks the Titanic never gets up. So something like that there, rising from the, like, not rising from the ashes or nothing, but like something that just gets down, gets back up, gets down, gets back up, because like that's how I view my role in the game. Like, I don't see myself as a prophet of soccer, or I don't see myself as a successful, like, I'm going to have 25 championships to my name. I just see myself as like, I have a platform. I'm fortunate to have a platform that I can impact maybe younger players, maybe young coaches. But regardless, like, I can impact the reality of the game. And the reality of the game is that when you think things are going well, it's going to go, you're going to get a setback and a disappointment sooner rather than later. And that's just the way life is as well. And that's where, like, that's probably been, that's what my parents kind of instilled me at a younger age, was like, don't get too excited when things are going good, and don't get too down when things are going bad, and you'll do all right. You'll just stay on track. I think that's important. Where, again, today's generation, we're dealing with, like, these kids lose their car keys. It's a disaster, and there's bigger challenges down the road. What requests do you have for the audience or the people listening?
Yeah, I mean, if it's a young coach and they want to, if they're looking for any advice, I would say, like, challenge players and to do it in a positive way. I mean, everyone, but to really challenge them, like, challenge their thinking, like, look at their routines, look at their daily lives, ask them, does that align with what they're trying to do? Like, really, build relationships, be a positive example, but, like, don't hide away that, that the majority of players aren't doing enough. And that's something that, it obviously from this interview, you can kind of tell, it frustrates me, because I think as a soccer, as a game, I don't think we're doing enough to really, really, really maximize what we've got in this country or anywhere else. Like, we've got to, so many, everyone wants to be a soccer player, like boys and girls, like everyone wants to be a superstar and everyone wants all the fame and glory, but not enough players want it bad enough that they're going to make themselves uncomfortable or do things on their own, little things.
Yeah.
So it would be along those lines.
Okay. And so how can fans interact or engage with you?
My two biggest ones are Twitter, at Gary Curneen, and then Facebook as well. Coach Curneen on Facebook, and I try to get either DMs or messages or anything at all. Yeah, I try to be as accessible as I can.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
No, enjoyed the chat, Josh. Some great questions. So good talking, and hopefully we'll do it again sometime.
Thanks for listening to the show. If you enjoyed it, subscribe to it on iTunes, Stitcher, Podcast Addict, Acast, or any podcasting catching app. Want to learn more about the guests and go behind the scenes? Then go to my website, www.footballoutobiographyshow.com, and subscribe to my newsletter. Also, if you like the show, or even if you hated it, leave a comment on either my Twitter page at footballlautobio or my Facebook page, The Football Autobiography Show. I welcome and would appreciate any feedback from you all. Thanks for listening. Take care.